Hello and welcome to the channel Love of the Truth. Today I thought we would discuss God's Spirit, what the scriptures have to say about God's Spirit, and phrases that are synonymous with, that the scriptures use interchangeably with God's Spirit. It seems that a lot of people are greatly confused about what that phrase means, what God's Spirit is. And one of the texts that I believe teaches that truth or truths about God's Spirit the best and the most clear is 1 Corinthians 2. And in that context, we're going to see that God's Spirit is contrasted with the spirit of the world. That those two things, according to that context and according to other scriptures and my observation, those two mindsets are directly opposed to one another. So let's take a look at 1 Corinthians 2 and see how Paul explains the Spirit of God in that text. Beginning in verse 1, "When I came to you, brothers, I did not come with eloquence or superior wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I came to you in weakness and fear and with much trembling. My message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on men's wisdom, but on God's power." So in this statement, Paul is contrasting men's wisdom with God's power, God's Spirit. And he is using interchangeably the phrase the Spirit's power and God's power. So what we understand is that there's a contrast in the sense that God's power is in contrasted with man's wisdom, and that there's similarity, or there are comparable, between God's power and the Spirit's power, or the power that is a component of the Spirit. As we take a look at texts that deal with the Spirit, and we won't have time to do that today, but there are several that talk about God's Spirit, and it uses it interchangeably with God's power and with God's wisdom, with God's thinking, God's mentality. But let's go on in the text and see what else we can find. "We do, however, speak a message of wisdom among the mature, but not the wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age, who are coming to nothing. No, we speak of God's secret wisdom, a wisdom that has been hidden and that God destined for our glory before time began. None of the rulers of this age understood it. For if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory." So in this text, in this context, Paul is explaining that the wisdom of the world is in contrast with the wisdom of God, that this is a wisdom that God ordained before the creation for the believers, and that wisdom is in direct contrast to the world's wisdom, and that it has to do with understanding. It's comprehending. Let's go on, starting in verse 9. "However, As it is written, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. But God has revealed it to us by his Spirit. So we need to observe, what is it that helps us understand, helps us know God's plan, the things that he has planned for those that love him, those that obey him. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the man's spirit within him? Now, the way that we understand ourselves is by observation and feeling and thinking and pondering and coming to understand what makes us tick and the things that we find appropriate, the things that we find inappropriate, the things we love, the things we hate. And all of those aspects of God's Spirit are integral to understanding him, to identifying him, to coming to know God, or to coming to know Christ, who was the perfect example of godliness. Let's go on in the text. In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. We have not received the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is from God, that we may understand. And here again, the net result of coming to the Spirit of God is understanding. That we may understand what God has freely given us. Verse 13. But this is what we speak, not in words taught us by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit, expressing spiritual truths in spiritual words. The man without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. And he cannot understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual man makes judgments about all things, but he himself is not subject to any man's judgment. So the crucial things in this text are the contrast between the spirit of the world and the Spirit of God. The world's thinking and attitudes and values, and God's thinking and attitudes and values. That is God's Spirit. Well, we understand this in common language in English. We talk about the spirit of Christmas or school spirit, a mean spirit, a gentle spirit, and all of those are attitudes and mentalities. And that is the predominant definition of the Spirit of God in Scriptures. Also, the power that is generated by God's mind, or that is produced by God's mind. Those two things are the components of God's Spirit, the Spirit that God possesses, the Spirit that God is the source of. I hope that's been enlightening, and as always, I welcome questions and comments. Until next time, thank you for watching.